So in this session, I want to start off by giving you an overview of the CR module and how this reconciliation process works, because it's important to understand how transactions are flowing in, what the CR module is actually really trying to do for you, to understand what setups are needed and what processes we need to plan for to help make it successful in the CR reconciliation process. Then, of course, we're going to talk about the actual CREC, check center entry screen and function and how you reconcile my fake bank statement for March of 2023. I admit I am behind a few months, so I do apologize. But we'll go through that in the current kind of manual way of reconciling. And then I'd also like to display for you that same month with the new CRER reconciliation import process, like I said, Infor had put into CSD. Not too long ago. And then we'll take a quick review of what we've learned, what we've talked about, and of course, then we'll open it up for any questions you may have. So you're welcome to start building questions, like Mark said, in the chat or in the questions section. I may not address them as I speak, but we'll definitely take a view and see what we've got at the end of the session. So here we go. First things first is we want to talk about the data inflows into the CR module. Now, all this talk today, what I do want to say is CR module is not necessarily a required function except for vendor payments. Regardless of what you do with your bank reconciliation, your AP payments, your accounts payable payments, are going to flow into the check rec module, and that's where you void your checks for AP. Of course, that's also where you clear, and maybe you still produce an outstanding checklist without doing the full reconciliation process in the system. All that is fine and well. The system doesn't really mind. You do build up some transactions in CREC, that check center entry, but you're not really hurting anything at that point if you don't go through this process. I like to think of this as kind of a, I don't know, an alternative subledger. So it's kind of fun for me. But those of you who know me will know I have a very odd sense of fun, so take that with a grain of salt. So the data that flows into the CR module, of course, is coming from all sorts of areas of the system, right? We have deposits coming from cash receipt entry, and of course, adjustments coming from payment reversals. We have transactions coming from order entry, right? When payments are tendered on customer orders, when received on account orders are placed, or payments are tendered, received on account, I should say. We have transactions coming from accounts payable, of course, from APEP, the pay invoices due, and we actually do a formal check run, and from also APECE for immediate pay transactions. If you do any manual payments, that will also flow into the check rec module. And then, of course, GLET, GL journal entry, if I'm doing just a manual journal entry to debit my bank charges and credit my cash, because the bank's got to get their piece too. If I interface those will create records in the check rec module, along with the records, of course, that they're posting to the accounts, the bank account itself. So it's creating that GL transaction, right? The journal entry that's hitting the bank account, bank GL account, but it's also creating a record or a transaction in the check rec module. So you can see how AR, creates deposits and adjustments. That makes sense, right? We're posting customer payments. If we do a reversal, it actually posts as an adjustment, not a negative deposit. So we do have to go looking for those a little bit differently. Order entry, if I'm posting payments, again, they're deposits from AP, and with a little asterisk here from CR, when we void checks, we can create checks, we can create charges, and we can create voids. And then from the GL module, we can create all sorts of transaction types. So it's good to know what options you have for reconciliation and what you're looking for when you're looking for different pieces to match up to your bank statement. But all these transactions flow into this check rec module database. Once we get to the time for reconciliation to the actual bank statement, Then we take all that stuff that happened in the check rec module database, if you will, this subledger of items that have happened to the bank GL, all those checks, charges, voids, deposits, and adjustments. And we take our bank statement and we compare it to what we have in the CR module, and we start to clear those transactions. It's recommended, or at least in my opinion, when you do these clearings, you really should do them as of the date on the bank statement and not necessarily, at the end of the month or just kind of one fell swoop, or maybe I'm doing March's today and so I cleared them as of today in August. Although the check rec module doesn't mind that, when you go to run reports after the fact, if you're trying to find, transactions that were posted through, let's say, March of 2023, and maybe we're outstanding as of March of 2023, now that clear date comes into play because we didn't clear it potentially until August 9th, right? If I didn't change my date. So that clear date should represent what's on your bank statement to help kind of research after the fact if it's ever needed. But as we go through the reconciliation, you go through and take your bank statement, go through your transactions. Of course, at this time, you're probably finding things that have hit your bank statement, but may not be in CR, right? Send POS fees, bank charges, perhaps there was a miscellaneous deposit from petty cash or something that didn't run through normal processes. This is where you're starting to find those things, those discrepancies of what's between your bank statement versus what's in CREC. So you say, I gotta go post my fees, or I gotta go post that miscellaneous deposit. So you post them, you integrate them, and then you clear them. Once you get down to the part where you feel like you've posted everything and you feel like you've cleared everything, then we run the CRRT, CR Trial Balance Report. So this report is very important because it's going to start with the last bank balance. So whatever you reconciled last month, it's going to plus and minus everything that you've cleared. And this is important because it will not really look at dates, right? Like my example there, I said something about I might clear things in March as of today. If I start to clear things in April today too, the system doesn't care. It just says, hey, you cleared it, and it's going to include that in the reconciliation. So when we're running these trial balance reports and when we're doing this reconciliation, we want to make sure that we're working 1 month at a time. And so I want to finish March before I start clearing things for April, finish April before I start clearing things for May, and so on, because it will kind of mess us up in this trial balance report. It'll show a variance. But if I'm working March's transactions and only March's transactions, and I think I've got it all, then perhaps my trial balance report might come out and be actually in balance. So the system then compares, like I said, we start with the last month's bank statement balance, we plus or minus everything that's cleared, and it compares it to the bank statement balance that I've entered in the system, right? I have to tell the system, my bank statement says I ended at $50,000. It doesn't know that. But once I tell it that, then it'll compare what I've done in the system and let me know, hey, you're still $500 off. In other words, go figure it out. Or, yep, you've cleared everything on your bank statement to this, it matches, you're good, you can move on to the next month. And that's really the decision process that happens down here. So we're looking at that CR trial balance report, and we'll see one today in our testing here a little bit later. But we'll see that CR trial balance report, and we look down at the bottom, and if it doesn't have any status messages or errors that say, hey, it's out of balance, go review, then we can move on to the next part. But if it does, back to the drawing board, right? Back around this little circle. And this little circle can go on for quite a little while anyways. But we go back, we review what was cleared. Perhaps we have things that were in CREC that we failed to clear. Or perhaps we have things that were on our bank statement that weren't in CREC that we just completely missed, right? So now we got to go post it and fix that. But you keep kind of going around in this little middle circle until you get a trial balance report that actually has no variances. So that's the indication that everything that you have cleared in check rec matches to your bank statement. Then you get to run CREB, which is the entry balance bank accounts. And this function is a point of no return, if you will. This is the function that tells the system I have balanced my bank account, take all the transactions that I have cleared. Again, I don't care what date I cleared them, but all the transactions that I have cleared for this reconciliation, and archive them, lock them down, mark them as balanced. And this is important for two reasons. One, it's going to pull all those cleared transactions out of my reconcile view that we'll see here in a bit, so that when I go to do next month, I don't have to worry about the stuff that cleared in March or February or last year or 10 years ago, depending on how long you've been in the system. So it keeps that reconcile view current with what really truly is outstanding to be reconciled to your bank account. The other important part that this does is related to the AP checks. So until I balance and kind of archive those transactions, I can actually unclear and void AP checks, which is really not something you want to happen if you've reconciled it to the bank statement, right? Bank says it cleared. We don't want to go through and unclear it and void it because it already came out of our bank account. So that's a very important function, really around the security, in my opinion, of AP checks and AP check processing in the system. So once we finalize, then we can start running all of our outstanding CR transaction lists. So our outstanding checks, our outstanding deposits, whatever we need for our bank reconciliation. Well, that's kind of the overall flow. Seems simple enough, right? The problem is that you do need a lot of cooperation and good business processes to make this little circle here, so you don't have to go around the roundabout too many times. The key to confidence in bank reconciliations done in the bank rec module, or CR module, I should say, is that our year-to-date bank GL account and our current balance in the check rec module for that bank we're reconciling are equal. When these two numbers are in balance, then you know that everything in your bank GL module is represented in the CR module, and vice versa, so that you're not clearing anything that wasn't actually posted to your general ledger, and you're not ignoring anything that was posted to the GL potentially in error, right? If I accidentally hit the bank GL for some manual posting and it's not in check rec, I won't have that outstanding reconciling item to say, hey, you got to go look at this. This advertising fee probably shouldn't have hit the bank, right? Likewise, if I'm trying to balance my bank statement and I, probably not trying to be malicious, but I think I'm doing the right thing, and I see that this ACH cleared off my bank statement, and I just enter a quick entry in the check rec module without confirming that it actually hit the GL somewhere, and I clear it, my bank statement will match my check rec, right? My CRRT will balance because, hey, I had that check in there to clear, but it's not actually represented in the general ledger. So these two numbers, and I'll point them out once we pop into the system, but these two numbers are so important to this reconciliation. That being said, they're so important, there actually is no stop on the report itself, on the trial balance that says, hey, your year-to-date bank GL doesn't tie to CR's current balance. There's nothing on the reports that's going to tell you that. So this is a manual check that you must do when you go to do your reconciliation. And I'm kind of under the impression, after working with this for a few years now, that there's no hard stop, because you can do your reconciliation of transactions while there's other activity going on in the system. And in some cases, there is normal activity that will cause a variance that we just have to kind of make sure that's what the variance is when we're doing this balance. So we don't really want CR to prevent us from reconciling, say if cash receipt entry has an open journal, because that'll give us postings in our GL, but it doesn't actually hit check rec until it's closed. So just one of those big caveats there. You got to keep those two numbers in balance. In this reconciliation process, and again, I'll admit, because if you know me, you know I'm honest about my feelings. When I was first introduced to the check rec module a long time ago, I thought, well, this is crazy. This is crazy because the check rec module is not really concerned with balancing your, let's say, because I'm going to work with March, balancing your March statement to March's GL balance. Check rec doesn't matter or doesn't care when it's posted. I could have been working on March today, realized there was a fee I missed, post it in the GL as of August, but it'll be in check rec so I can clear it against my March statement. And if that, at this point, you're probably all reaching for the keyboard to hop into the chat and say, well, hey, Anna, aren't you an accountant? Don't you know that bank reconciliations are typically reconciled to the end of the month GL balance, right? And the answer is yes and yes. The process doesn't necessarily replace the reconciliation of the bank statement to the month-end bank GL balance if that's important to you and or your auditors. In some companies, where they really only care about the end of the year. In other companies, they want to make sure each month is balanced. But what this process does do is it supplements that reconciliation process with system-generated reports representing the outstanding transactions. So in the course of clearing the transactions to the bank statement activity, you'll find items that need to be posted. You'll find items that maybe were posted incorrectly. And as long as the transaction is in CREC, then it can either be cleared, or if it's wrong, now it's in your face, it's wrong, right? Like I didn't need this. Hey, this adjustment's been sitting out here since October of last year. What are we supposed to do with it? Or hey, this check's been out here since, October of last year. What is it really truly still outstanding? So when you've reached the endpoint where CR trial balance is balanced and the year-to-date GL balance balances again with your current balance in CR, then like I said, you have system-generated reports now that will supplement that that kind of external bank reconciliation, really. Because at this point now you can say, okay, well, show me everything that was posted through, and again, I'm working in March, so I'm gonna say I've posted everything through March that hasn't been cleared yet. And those will be my outstanding checks, my outstanding deposits, and if I've got any adjustment entries in there that are just kind of reconciling items, they may be timing or they may be reconciling, but they're there. So everything should kind of tie together very nicely. Whereas if we were doing this all externally in the system, we'd be looking through, many, many, many GL transactions. All right. So let's talk about the check reconciliation entry center itself. So there's a couple views here, and I put this mostly in the PowerPoint for you to have after the fact. I'm actually going to hop into the system right now and show you, as opposed to show you a PowerPoint. So here is my system. Make it a little bit bigger. Here's our demo environment. So the check reconciliation entry center, if you go through the menu down here in check reconciliation, entry, and check center. Or sorry, it's check center entry. Check center entry. The one thing that's always missed here is that you do have to specify your bank before you'll see anything in the views here. So we want to make sure that we grab our little drop down here and pick our bank and then click search. And once you have your bank noted up here at the top, up here at the top, then you know you're within that bank and you'll see the transactions that you want to see. So first and foremost, we land on this reconcile view. This is the main work center of check center entry, right? This should be reflective of only those transactions that we're in the process of reconciling for this month. So you're absolutely welcome to, do this on a daily or a weekly basis, clear your checks, As long as you're working in the same month, right? And by the time we get to the end of the month, we don't want to start clearing the new month until we finalize this month. But once you do that and you're in that month, you can absolutely kind of keep up with this throughout the month. You don't have to try to do this all at the end of the month. The different transaction types here, right? So we have our checks, typically coming from accounts payable. We have charges, which if you did the ACH, vendor electronic remittance, and actually kind of went with vendor payments that way, they will show up as charges. You could also book charges directly from GL entry. So if you were, posting some ACHs and wanted to record them as a charge type transaction instead of, say, an adjustment, you could label that as they go out of your bank account. Adjustments, kind of a mixed bag. So system-wise, the only thing that really posts here automatically are those payment reversals coming from ARECR payment reversal here in the cloud, right? Most clients I work with, when they're talking about GL entries to the bank, will often say, okay, all my GL, my general ledger entries, my manual entries, right? My fees, my adjustments, my write-offs, whatever the case may be, I'm going to post them as transaction type adjustments because I can post a plus or minus. I don't have to worry about flipping the transaction type, and I know exactly where to look now for general ledger adjustments. So if I know that I always post my SendPos fees and my bank fees by GL module, right, by GL entry, then I know I need to come into adjustment to clear my transactions. Of course, we have our deposits coming from accounts receivable and also order entry, which will be another point of conversation here in a minute. But definitely all those payments coming in are posting as deposits. There's our voids, right, which I don't have any outstanding right now. And usually they don't stay outstanding, but I've seen in some cases where they do. But those will offset, of course, a check that might be here in my check center entry. There's a few other transactions here that you can get really fancy with. So if you have interest payments or interest received that you want to record and you want to record that as an interest type transaction, you absolutely can. And then of course, if you have transfers in and transfers out, when you do that GL entry between bank accounts, you can tag them as these types of transactions as well. It's all about how you want to reconcile, where you want to look for those transactions. So if we think now, sticking with this idea of the transfer in and transfer out, I might post that as adjustment and be happy because that's where I'm going to go look at that. Or if I have a lot of adjustment activity, I might want to post them truly as transfer in, transfer out transactions, just because that's where I want to go look at them. So same thing is true for like charge from the general ledgers. So I know some people who post their sales tax from the GL module, right? Just regular GL journal entry, and they'll post them as a charge type transaction because it's an automatic debit out of their bank account. So that's where they want to go look to reconcile those transactions. It's all about how you want to reconcile. The next view up here is the bank view. This gives us all our static information about the bank, right? This is the Bank of Nevada. Go figure, right? I'm in Las Vegas, so it's going to be a Nevada bank. You better believe it. What GL account is this bank associated with? And this is very important for reconciliation, that you should only have one CRSB bank record, which is what this is, check reconciliation bank setup record, one bank record tied to one GL account. Now, it's very possible for those of you who have multiple divisions, perhaps you have another bank record that's Division 2 1015, and that's Bank of California. That's perfectly fine, as long as that account code on the full string is unique to this bank record, then you'll still be able to reconcile. But the minute you start splitting it across CRSB banks, reconciliation is impossible. Okay, whether or not this bank is active, we see some of the last numbers used, some of the current balances. There's my very important number. my current balance, right? This is the number that should tie to my bank GL. So I'm skipping ahead because I bumped into it. So let's go take a quick look. If I look at GL account inquiry, provided nobody's changed anything on me between now and last night, which somebody might have. See, here we go. So my current balance now in my CR is higher than my GL year-to-date, oops, balance. Oh, nope, I was looking at the wrong month. See, that's what I get for posting something in August and working several months behind. So here we go, 76,826.38 is my year-to-date balance, and 76,826.38 is my current balance. So I can move forward with reconciling what's currently in CR with confidence. Everything's represented between GL and CR, even though that transaction here is in August. Doesn't matter to check rec. It's all about, are we keeping tabs? And think of it again, kind of really as a subledger. Does my CR subledger transactions, my checks, deposits, adjustments, and whatnot, does that tie to my GL balance? Just like we would think of kind of our ARRT, AR trial balance, our inventory subledgers, and so on. And then contact information. If you really want to store that in there, you can put it in there. But main number here that we're looking for is our current balance. The system will also keep track of, when was the last check cut? When was the last time you balanced this? What's, going through this process? So I did a reconciliation for February 28th, 2023. And at that time when I reconciled, my bank balance was 18,000. And that's the bank statement balance, not the CR balance. At the time I did that reconciliation, well, you see, it hasn't really moved much. I'll have to go find out what my teams are doing. But when I did this validation for this bank balance, my CR balance was last verified at 76,826. So I haven't had any postings between last night and today. Transactions view is your historical archive of all the transactions that run through the CR module for this bank. So when we talk about that CREB balance bank account function that we do to finish our reconciliation, it's really taking the transactions that are cleared from the reconcile view, right? Get it out so I'm not shifting through 9,000 records, right, to go clear stuff, and moves them so that they're only visible here in the transactions view. But that's not to say that you can't see everything in this transactions view. So there's going to be stuff that's cleared, and there's also going to be stuff that's not cleared yet. So you can see these deposits aren't cleared yet. Everything sits in this transaction view, and it's a nice little research tool. So you can look up checks, you can look up charges, you can look up deposits and whatnot. What happened? When did we void this? What did we do? How did we reprint, right? All the questions that the accountants come asking. But one of the fun things in this module, or in this view, I should say, that is often overlooked is the ability to take an AP check, select it. From here, I can look at the GL distribution, which is going to be kind of boring because it's usually going to be a debit to accounts payable and a credit to the bank, right? It's the GL behind the actual payment of this invoice, not the invoice itself, because this could be multiple invoices on this check. But the sub-transactions is kind of fun. So if I click sub-transactions, now I can see what invoices did we pay on this check. So there's my check record, and then the 3 scheduled payment records, and the 3 invoice numbers, and of course their amounts. So it's another way to get at what we paid on this check. Of course, you can go to vendor inquiry, look up the check number, and also get those records. Just another way to find it. Oops, sorry about that. All right, so custom, of course, if you put any user fields in here, then that would show up on the custom view. Heading back for a quick second to the reconcile view, there's a few functions here to note. So first and foremost, we have our quick entry. And quick entry is the way that you can add transactions into the CR module First and foremost, it's the way you void AP checks. So if I have to void an AP check, unless you do a process external of the CR module, which I have worked with a few clients who do, they choose to kind of reinstate the payables manually by posting new invoices to the vendor account. But you can come in here and do a void and void those checks and say yes to the reverse AP and GL question that pops up, and it'll reopen those invoices to go pay on a next check run if needed. All the other transactions that are in here, except the void, do not affect the general ledger or any other module in the system. So if I post a deposit here into CheckRec, it's not going to go against a customer account or towards a customer account, I should say. It's not going to show in the general ledger. These quick entries are used to help bring the GL balance of the bank and the CR module back into balance. So if I find these transactions that don't interface, where I have a variance, for some reason, maybe somebody posted a customer invoice, a manual customer invoice and customer transaction entry, they posted it against the bank GL, that's not going to interface to CheckRec, but it sure did hit my bank GL. So then I can post a quick entry to reflect that transaction and have something to clear against my bank statement. I can also use this to help with timing adjustments. Hopefully you don't have too many of these, but let's say I do one big journal entry for all the miscellaneous GL stuff that I typically book for the bank statement, and for some reason one particular payment, my 401k payment, didn't happen to come out this month. Well, I don't have to go back and reverse that entire journal entry. I can just stay here in CheckRec, enter a positive and a negative of the same amount, and that keeps GL and CheckRec in balance because it's a net zero affected to the CheckRec. And now I have the positive to offset my money going out for this month because it didn't go out this month, but it hit my GL. And then I still have an outstanding negative in my CR to reconcile against in next month's bank statement when the payment actually does come out of my account. So that's how quick entry can work. And you absolutely can void check ranges if you need to. The other options we have here are quick clear. And if I select a transaction, we have clear and reset. So this is how you actually clear transactions. If you have a range of transactions you want to clear, you can quick clear them, although it is by check number. Or especially in CSD, because the grids are just so much more flexible, you can sort and filter and do all sorts of wonderful things. I can select several transactions at a time and clear them all at once, or I can reset them all at once. If you're in a different version, perhaps graphical, the CR module isn't quite as flexible, but here's something for you to look forward to. All right, so let's head back to the PowerPoint. So that's all the little pieces of the check reconciliation entry center. Now we'll talk about the reports related to this process. So I'm talking about the CRRT, right? The CR trial balance. This is going to check that calculation of your last bank statement plus or minus all your cleared stuff to give you your calculated bank balance that is compared against what you entered as the bank statement bank balance to let you know if you've cleared everything or if there's some variances and you got to go try again. You can run this report as many times as you need to, whenever you need to. You're not updating anything, you're not archiving anything, and whatever you need to do, that's your report as your gut check, if you will, on your reconciliation. Then, of course, we talked about CREB, right? CREB is that finalize. So even though I might have reconciled last night and my CR trial balance was beautiful, I'm not just going to come in this morning and run CREB. I will run my trial balance one more time just to make sure nothing happened between last night and today, and make sure it's still in balance, and then I will run CREB if there's no variances. It's good practice, although not required, to go ahead and make sure that that current bank balance is tied to that year-to-date GL balance before you run CREB. It's not going to stop you if it's not. the report really doesn't care about the GL balance, but it gives you confidence that what you are finalizing truly does tie in all aspects of the process. Okay. Then we have a couple reports here for outstanding and not even outstanding, but really just reporting on those transactions itself. So we have our CRRC, the check register report. This is most often used to print your outstanding checks and deposits at the end of the month, but of course you can change the status, you can change the transaction types you're looking for, you can look at things that were posted as of a certain date. They don't have to be uncleared and outstanding. There's all sorts of ways you can run this report, but most people come to this report for those outstanding checks and deposits listings. The counterpart to this report, and it's so very similar, except it's got a little bit of a different emphasis, is the CRRA. And I'll tell you, this is probably my favorite over CRRC, just because it has that added ability to run things based on journal number, right? I can run based on the posted date, just like I can in CRRC, but now I can also run based on journal number. And when the report runs, it actually shows me the journal number that the items were posted on. So if I do have a variance between my check rec module and my GL balance, and it's not due to any open journals or zero check AP transactions, then I usually run the CRRA and compare that against my bank GL, because I can compare now based on journal number. So you can choose which report you prefer. They both really have kind of the same purpose, just a little bit different information. So really what it boils down to, right? Two big primary goals when we're planning to use the CR module. Keeping the GL and CR balanced. I haven't pounded that into your head enough today. But this is paramount to this process. Without maintaining that balance, you cannot have confidence that the transactions you cleared are in fact posted to the GL, and that you are aware of all the transactions that have posted to the GL, if you don't have them in CR. The second point is to try to post activity to the CR in the same manner that the items come in on your bank statement. So if your AR checks, let's say, big batch of checks comes into your branch and your AR department posts them, do they hit your bank statement as one big remote deposit, or do they get bunched up by branch on your bank statement? You want to try to encourage the team to post their journals, because what happens is maybe there's 50 checks in that journal, right? When I look at the bank GL when that's posted, I'll see 50 debits to my bank GL. But when that finalizes and closes and moves to check rec, that's one deposit entry in check rec. So if we can post in a similar manner to the way things show on the bank statement, it makes reconciling that bank statement so much easier, because you're not, adding and taking away from different deposits. Easier said than done in some cases, but considering a very important point to consider. It's not impossible if they can't do it in the way that is posted to the bank statement, but it can be very difficult, very difficult. So when we talk about, when we talk about transactions and that variance between the bank GL and the CR, there are some transactions that will inherently cause a variance, right? They don't interface to check rec. Customer transaction entry, if I enter invoices and miscellaneous credits, they don't interface to CR. Normally, we're not posting to the bank GL for those, but I have seen some cases where, hey, we got a payment from a customer, and instead of posting it through cash receipt entry, we entered a miscellaneous credit to the customer account through ARET. That's great. You increased your bank GL, but you didn't record that in CR. So this would be one of those instances where you'd have to go post a quick entry deposit to reflect that entry that hit the GL. Similar situation for write-offs performed in cash receipt entry. The only amount that interfaces to CR is that check amount that you put in on that first screen. That's the deposit amount. That's what's going to check rec, not anything that you do in the GL distribution screens in the write-off of cash receipt entry. Same thing with vendor expense type invoices and credits. Kind of similar scenario there. Hey, I made a prepayment to my vendor, so I posted it as a miscellaneous credit to my vendor's account. Well, that's great. You hit the bank GL, but that doesn't hit check rec. And then of course, GLET transactions if I don't interface them properly. So we want to try to avoid these scenarios because they can, they take time to research and fix. When we're looking at processes, again, we want to look at how AR organizes their deposit postings. Probably the bigger headache are the next two, and that's all from order entry, because these transactions from order entry are difficult to control, right? My salespeople are in and out of orders all day long, so it can be tough to say, hey, you got to keep your journal open all day. That's never going to happen. The other fun thing is that it's tough to get them to close their journals at the end of the night, right? So if I have order entry open today and I did some tendering and I didn't close out of my system and I went home and I came back the next morning and sure, my system, I open it up and it says, hey, you're in this journal, and I just ignore it and I keep going on with my day, all the payments that I'm tendering tomorrow show up on today's journal. So, we try to kind of pull order entry out of this process by using tendering banks or the credit card dummy customer account. So take a second here. So that credit card, we can't really cover it in this session, but this is another topic kind of near and dear to my heart, but about reconciliation of credit cards when you are integrated with SendPOS. This is another area that if you came to me prior to July of 2020 and said, oh, show me how you do the credit card customer account to reconcile credit cards, I would say, well, you're going to have this problem, you're going to have that problem. Things will look like they invoiced, but you really didn't get the money. It can be a nightmare. But when Infor changed the way that SendPOS settles to be during invoice processing and actually, hold invoices or prevent them from invoicing if the credit card fails, this greatly improved the credit card reconciliation process using an AR kind of, I say dummy credit card customer. I hate to call it a dummy credit card customer. It's a credit card deposit timing customer. And what this reconciliation does is kind of pull the whole process out of having to review individual GL transactions again. Some people are wired that way to look at it that way and other people are not. But it makes it a very visual reconciliation on a customer account. So now I can say, hey, AR person, you're just going to post these like you would any other customer payment and clear them. And everything that's left over is either timing or a problem. But it's all very visible on a credit card customer account. And that's one way we can kind of pull that order entry mess out of our main bank GL and really replace it with the deposit posting coming from cash receipt entry, posting that dummy credit card customer account. The other thing we have to consider are any special AP payment processes you may have, whether you do something special for ACHs or credit card payments to the vendor. We need to look at how those flow and how they would come back to your main bank GL if needed so they can be matched up. Setups to consider: what modules will integrate to check reconciliation? So there are some options here in admin options. Oops, and I see I'm running out of time, so I'm going to try to kick this up a notch here. But in the financials and the admin options, we do have the ability to turn off the interface from certain modules if we need to. Notice accounts payable is not here because you cannot turn off that accounts payable. It is managed in check reconciliation. The only one that I typically see possibly turned off is the sales order entry, because again, we don't want that OEET mess in our CR module. We'll account for it some other way, but we do have to make sure that if we turn this off, that we are accounting for it some other way. Flip back over here. What banks do we set up in the CRSV bank setup? So this goes into those processes. Are we going to have a tendering timing account that all order entry is going to flow to based on the payment type setup? Are we going to have a special bank for ACH payments for vendors? Are we going to have a special bank for credit card payments to vendors? It's the CRSB bank setup that helps drive the GL for those transactions. And then we take them out of those banks and GLs and we bring them into the main bank that we're reconciling in the manner that we want to. All right, so now the meat and potatoes. So reconciling in check center entry. I know there's a lot of words here. I'm going to show you what we're going on. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to confirm your balances match, right? Again, GL balance to current book balance. You're going to look for any open journals if you do have a variance. If there are no open journals and there's from cash receipt entry and there's no AP module stuff with no bank or no check number, because with AP, I can cut the checks, AP EP runs, it creates the GL entry, but it doesn't get recorded in the CR module until print check is done and the check number is assigned. Or if I have any of those manual transactions from GL or ARET like we talked about that don't interface to check rec. So I want to research those just to make sure I can have confidence in what's in my check center. I'm going to clear my transactions. I'm going to post any missing entries that I need to with that quick entry, right? Making sure first that it is in the GL. Or I might have actual transactions to post in AR or GL that would come through to the bank. Run my trial balance. Once there's no variance, run my bank balance or balance bank accounts, and then lastly, my outstanding checklist. So very quickly here, I have kind of a small bank statement. I'm sure yours are much more complicated than this, but here's my small statement for March. If I were to do this in check center entry, basically what I'd be looking at is just clearing these as of the date they are. Sorry, I'm playing musical monitors here. So I can control that date cleared up here, and I can say, yep, they said this check and this check cleared on that date, and you can see it'll start to clear it. So I would follow that through my entire bank statement, then run CRRT. Obviously, it's not going to be balanced, but I can run my CRRT. 3/31/23. Ending bank balance was 22884.41. Next and save, just to give you an idea what it looks like, because I do want to show you the check reconciliation center. And ta-da! So print options is always a good idea. We drop down, it's going to list out, where did we start from? So our last bank balance was 18,836, plus or minus the transactions we cleared gives us this bank balance is calculated. That's coming from the CR module. Here's my bank balance as entered, the statement balance. And sure enough, hey, I have out of balance conditions. This means I need to go look, if it's up here, I gotta go look at what I've cleared because I probably missed something or I've cleared something that's not on my statement. Usually if you have a message up here, you have a message down here. And once you clear this message, typically this one down here goes away too. So I'm not too worried about that one at the moment, but you can kind of see how CR walks it forward that, okay, this is what we're clearing for March, plus or minus the outstanding, gives us our adjusted book bank balance against our current book balance, and sure enough, we're over because there's stuff that we haven't cleared yet, right? So this is where I would go back and start clearing things until it goes away and I can run CREB. Now, Infor put in a whole reconciliation from Excel, which is super fun. So CRSR is our reconciliation rule setup. Now, I will say that this requires, in order for this piece to work well, you have to have things flowing into CheckRec in a manageable way. If you have all sorts of order entry stuff and you're constantly doing timing adjustments to try to reconcile, or AR isn't organizing their deposits, doing this by the Excel import will be near impossible. But basically you set up rules telling the system that we're going to look for this text, check text. It's going to be matched to a check transaction type. And that's how we're going to match based off of check number and amount. Deposits, I'm looking specifically for remote deposits. You can see in my statement, my bank says remote deposit. Adjustments, I'm going to be looking for those transactions that say ACH debit. So you're kind of telling the system, look for these and then try to match the amount to match up these items. Once you have your rules set up, then it's CRER first instead of CREC. I always pick my bank. I can import from Excel, Bank of Nevada, 331.23, 22,884.41. So I still have to tell it what the ending balance is. And now I can bring that Excel file in. If I have more than 50 lines, I do have to expand that. But bring that Excel file in, it's going to show you what it's bringing in. Yep, I like that. Click Submit. And then once it's in here, I can select that and run the rule matching. So now it's going to go through those rules against what I have open in CR versus what was on that Excel import. And you can see now I've got some matched and still one that is not. When I drill into the detail, it shows me all those lines from what was imported, and sure enough, I've got a service fee out here that was not matched. I didn't post that in the GL. I didn't have it out there in CR for it to match to. And the fun thing about this new feature is that I can actually post that entry, provided that it's going to one GL account, right? And that I don't have to spread it across multiple divisions. I can post that entry from here. So if I click manual, I can say, yep, it's going to be a service analysis fee. I don't need to put in an offset bank because it's not a transfer, but I do have to have my GL account, which I can change. But in this case, this is the account I want it to go to. I hit save. I go back. Now I have to submit. You say, hey, the difference is still there. I do have to submit that transaction. And perhaps I do want to take this back to March just because that's my accounting OCD side. I can open up that journal of March. The balanced bank account question here is asking you if you want to run CREB. I do not run this until I have a balanced trial balance. So I'm going to say no, but it's still going to post the entry for that adjustment. And now you see my total difference is 0. Everything is matched. I can run my trial balance from here. Grab my trial balance. Scroll on down. I have a beautifully balanced trial balance, right? Super easy. Don't you wish all your bank statements were like that? And then now that that's balanced, I just hit submit. Do I want to balance my bank accounts? Absolutely. Show me my report. And now it's running CREB and finishing that process. And there's my CREB. So your CREB report looks just like your CRRT trial balance, except it did the extra piece of archiving those transactions. I had to kind of kick it into high gear, so I didn't even get to say on the flip side, but there's on the flip side the check reconciliation center that we just went through, that we can manually match some transactions. We can do it from an Excel import file. We do have to complete or delete the reconciliation, and it is up to you. I have had a couple clients who say, hey, we really don't reconcile within CR module, but we like this feature for potentially clearing our checks. And so they're not really so concerned about the variances in CR because they do their reconciliation external of the system, but they do use it to clear checks. And so that is a possibility for that new functionality. So in today's session, and I apologize for the high speed towards the end, but we looked at the CR module in depth, talked about setups and process planning, looked at both manually reconciling, which is most of the people that I've worked with, we're still kind of doing that because we can't get it quite clean enough for the new CRER reconciliation import. Not that it has to be perfect, but you don't want to be touching a lot of transactions and having to add several different CR lines to a bank statement line if you can help it. So we really have to get to a good point in the CR reconciliation before we can go towards the import. There's our session review. And that leaves us a couple minutes for questions. And I do see one from Amy that came a little bit earlier. How can a CRRT show no variance, but it does not match the bank GL? That's a great question, Amy. And it really is all about because somebody went in and added a quick entry into CR, potentially, that was not reflected in the general ledger module. That entry may tie to your bank statement, but it was never posted to the GL. So to the CR trial balance, you've cleared everything that's on your bank statement, but you have this hidden thing that didn't get posted to your GL. There's no stop between those two. Or potentially maybe I did a GL reversal, right? GLER, maybe something I posted a service fee and I did a reversal. That can also throw off the variance because GLER doesn't interface, but GLET can. So it's very possible to have the things in CR to match to your bank statement, so you really don't show a variance. But in reality, you do have one kind of behind the scenes between check rec and GL. That's probably the hardest thing to grasp about this whole process, is why that is so important that those two things match and what happens if they don't. Take you right down to the wire. Is there any other questions from the group? I don't see anything else in the chat or the question panel.
No. All right. If any of our attendees here today still have questions to ask but are unable to right now, please feel free to reach out this week or to me, myself, and I'll make sure that you're connected with our team. I believe that'll conclude today's webinar. Great job, Anna. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.